Royal fans are convinced Meghan Markle is lying about her age. In fact, they think she's older.
Your age so wrong. Did you know that in 1997, when she met Yasmin Bleeth, when she claims that she was working for Humphrey Yogurt, age 13.
Page 90. One number. And suddenly, a perfectly controlled public identity starts to crack in ways nobody can neatly explain. Because this isn't just a typo buried in some forgotten corner of the internet. This is a decades-old magazine archive still sitting there, untouched, uncorrected, quietly challenging everything people thought they knew. In March 1997, a routine feature in 17 magazine listed Meghan Markle as 21 years old. Not 15. Not even close. 21. And that single detail didn't just raise eyebrows, it opened a door that has never fully closed. Because here's the problem no one has been able to cleanly answer. How does a 5-year error survive editors, fact-checkers, approvals, and still exist today without a single official correction? Was it really a mistake, or was it something far more deliberate that nobody wants to touch? Because once you see it, you can't unsee it. Every official record says August 4th, 1981. Every biography repeats it. Every search result confirms it. And yet that archive, still public, still accessible, tells a completely different story. And that contradiction sits there like a loose thread nobody has managed to pull out without unraveling something bigger. Because this is where it gets uncomfortable. Public figures don't just live one life. They live two. The one that happened and the one they present. Most of the time, the gap between those two is small enough that no one notices. But sometimes, that gap becomes the entire story.
Let's actually get to the truth of this issue, and it's a surprise. Here we go. So, if you go over on Google, is she lying about her age? It currently says August 4th, 1981, that she is 41. Well, she would be 42 today.
And just when you think maybe this is all noise, you look at the people who were actually there. Not strangers, not commentators. Family, Samantha Markle has publicly confirmed 1981 as the birth year. Clear, direct on record. That should end it, right? Except it doesn't. Because people digging through the defamation lawsuit Meghan filed against Samantha started noticing something strange buried inside the court filings. Documents submitted under oath. And what they claim to have found there doesn't sit comfortably next to that public confirmation. That gap between what's said publicly and what may exist privately is exactly the kind of detail that refuses to disappear. Then there's Thomas Markle Sr., not speculating, not hinting, saying directly that the narrative of struggle the self-made climb doesn't match what he saw, that she wasn't navigating early Hollywood as some scrappy teenager trying to survive, that she was comfortable, supported, on set, not struggling. That cuts straight through one of the most repeated parts of her public story. And then Thomas Markle Jr., still speaking, still resurfacing, still adding to the same pattern. And this is where it stops looking like coincidence, because it's not one voice, it's three separate people, no coordination, no shared script, all pointing at different times to the same cracks. Because here's the thing people keep missing. If this was just bitterness, it would be messy, inconsistent, scattered, but it's not. It keeps circling the same core contradictions again and again and again. And that's the kind of repetition that makes people stop and ask what exactly isn't lining up here.
She's obviously missing out on a really good, tight-knit family. I mean, we're all still together all the time, no matter what.
And then you step away from family and look at her own words, her own stories, the ones told in interviews on television, repeated over time until they feel like fact. And this is where the details start to shift in ways that are much harder to ignore, because big claims, easy to maintain. But small, specific details, those are the ones that expose everything. The frozen yogurt shop, working at 13. Sounds grounded, relatable, real, until someone actually contacts the shop. And the response comes back they never employed anyone that young. Not then, not under those rules, no exceptions. So now there are only two possibilities. Either the business is wrong about its own hiring practices, or the story doesn't match reality. And it doesn't stop there. The deodorant commercial, dated to 1996 or 1997. Against the official timeline, that places her at 15 or 16. But the way the story is told, it doesn't sound like a 15-year-old experience. It sounds older, more independent, like two different versions of the same moment existing side by side. And then the Couric story, the letter, the commercial, the moment that supposedly defined everything. Except the age attached to it doesn't stay fixed. It shifts, depending on the interview. And that's the one detail that shouldn't move. Because when a story is built on a specific childhood moment, the age is the anchor. If that changes, everything changes with it.
When I was just 11 years old, I unknowingly and somehow accidentally became a female advocate.
Now pause and look at the pattern forming, because this isn't random. Random arrows scatter in every direction. But this moves one way every time. Oh, they're the yogurt shop, the commercial, the interview, even Northwestern University timelines being quietly questioned at the edges, each one requiring a slightly different age to make sense, but all of them leaning in the same direction.
You are the Duke of Cornwall. So we need to put you to the test. We've got some scones here with some jam and clotted cream. I think you know where this is going.
And just when the timeline questions start tightening, something shifts in real time. Not in the past, not buried in archives. Right now, Prince William sits down for what looks like a completely relaxed interview. Nothing aggressive, nothing controversial. Talking about Catherine, sharing light moments, even casually settling a cream tea debate that spreads across the internet within hours. Calm, controlled, effortless. The kind of presence that doesn't need to fight for attention because it naturally holds it. And then, almost immediately after, Meghan Markle posts a video. Not days later, not weeks later. The same cycle, same moment. And suddenly, people aren't just watching the content, they're watching the timing, because the video itself, polished, controlled, carefully produced, but inside it, something different, something that hadn't appeared before. The names, Lily, Arch, not implied, not protected, spoken directly, inside branded content tied to a commercial purpose. And that's where the reaction detonates, because for years, privacy around those names had been absolute, non-negotiable, repeated, reinforced, and now suddenly they're part of a public-facing moment designed to be seen. That shift alone would have been enough. But layered on top of everything else, it feels deliberate, precise, almost like a response without ever saying it's a response. And that's the moment everything reframes, because that kind of timing doesn't happen by accident. It requires awareness, constant awareness of the media, of the narrative, of what people are saying and when they're saying it, which leads to one unavoidable conclusion. If that level of attention exists for the present, it exists for the past too. The archives, the conversations, the questions that keep resurfacing. And yet, on the one topic that refuses to disappear, nothing. No statement, no clarification, no denial. Silence, complete, consistent silence. And while that silence holds, something else starts circulating again. Not new, not recent. Something that keeps returning at very specific moments. A photograph, not described, not rumored. An actual image that people tracking this story recognize instantly every time it reappears. And what makes it impossible to ignore isn't just what it supposedly shows, it's when it shows up. Because the timing isn't random. It never has been. Every time the age discussion gains traction, the image comes back. Same cycle, same pattern. Dismissed immediately. Fake, edited, AI generated, out of context. The responses are fast, coordinated in tone if not in origin. And yet, when someone actually runs the image through detection software, not speculation, not opinion, the result comes back 94% authentic, not confirmed, not proven beyond doubt, but not dismissed either. And that percentage becomes less important than the pattern itself, because people stop asking what the image shows and start asking why it keeps appearing exactly when it does. And then the deeper layer, the one that's harder to explain away, documents, or more accurately, the absence of them. Because when people try to verify timelines through official channels, they keep hitting the same wall. A reported marriage certificate linked to Chicago mid-1990s. Never confirmed, never denied, just unreachable, sealed, and that word keeps repeating. Sealed, not missing, not lost. Sealed, because if the official timeline holds August 4th, 1981, then that document places Meghan Markle at 14, not close to 14. 14, and that isn't a small inconsistency, that's a complete rewrite of the narrative. But shift the timeline back even slightly and suddenly the same document tells a completely different story. And that's the tension sitting underneath everything. Two timelines, two completely different implications, one answer that nobody can access. And it doesn't stop there, because it's not one document, it's several. Different records, different entries, all clustering around the same narrow window of time, the same years that every other contradiction keeps circling back to. And individually, each one can be explained. Privacy, legal protection, administrative process. But together, they stop looking random, they start looking connected. Because here's what this actually becomes when you step back. Not one mistake, not one rumor, not one contradiction. A stat, a pattern, a direction that keeps repeating no matter where you start. A magazine archive that was never corrected. Family statements that never aligned. Personal stories that require shifting timelines to function. A photograph that refuses to disappear. Documents that exist just out of reach. And above all of it, silence. From someone who has never stayed silent when it mattered before. Meghan Markle has challenged institutions, narratives, people, systems publicly and directly. That pattern is documented, proven, consistent, except here. On this one question, the one that sits in a publicly accessible archive for anyone to verify.